Next.
Yes, I'm Bernard Reyes from Island Pacific Supermarket. My testimony is also to share you our great experience with Frontier. So when we open up our branch in Cerritos in Southern California, we called their technical service, and within 2 hours they resolved the issues, and we opened our market and served the customers the way we should be. And I just want to share to you guys the excellent service that we have from.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for making this time available so that you learn more about this transition with Frontier. My name is Susan Walters. I'm the Senior Vice President at the California Emerging Technology Fund. I'm here to share a couple key points that I think are very important as you hear about the detail of these issues and learn more about what you might be able to do. The first, which I think you've already acknowledged and recognized, that in fact Frontier does have an expertise that California needs, especially in the rural and rural remote areas. And that is not only based on their time in California, but based on their time in other places in the country. This is very important to closing the digital divide in California, and very key to the second point, which I am not sure how much you are aware of in terms of the actual merger process and the fact that during the last 4 applications for mergers, there were more public participation hearings in this application than any other. In fact, there were 11. And that is due to the nature or the number of complaints that the CPUC knew existed about Verizon infrastructure. And the commission in this instant played a key role in making sure that Frontier knew what it was buying or had the opportunity to investigate, also made sure that Verizon would apply for the Connect America funds in time for Verizon, for Frontier to take advantage of them after the transition, which is key given the number of complaints and issues that were expressed from the north end of the state to the south end of the state. And part of what is important to understand for your deliberations today is, in fact, the type of complaints representing a pattern of Verizon over at least the last 10 years for not maintaining the network. What we've heard so far this afternoon is some of those issues weren't apparent for Verizon to share with Frontier ahead of time, so they couldn't have been proactive. But the types of complaints out of Long Beach, August 10th, all right, Verizon has not properly maintained its traditional copper landlines, often in violation of California safety codes. Without the proper copper lines, DSL isn't possible or is incredibly slow. People at the hearing wanted to be assured that after the sale, Frontier would invest in upgrading the network to provide safe, reliable service and high-speed broadband. Again, out of Long Beach, former mayor from Seal Beach and another member who has sat on the planning commission there talked about how Verizon's lines, their infrastructure, was corroded, how the problems had persisted for years, that in fact they spent time taking care of the network, especially before it rains. They said, all bets are off. My lines get staticky. Calling a technician doesn't help. The problem is you have to wait until it dries out. You have to wait at least 5, 6, 7 days.
I'm going to interrupt you right there. We've already had testimony from Frontier that the 2 main issues with the transition had to do with database corruption and also with serial numbers on hardware not matching up or being inaccurate. We appreciate the comments on the previous carriers' issues with the network, but I would venture that given the amount of, again, my email address is public, my phone number is public, same thing with my colleague from Long Beach, my colleague from the South Bay. The volume of complaints that we have gotten in the last month are by a factor of 1,000 bigger than what we had previously. So to say that this was all a pre-existing corroded network, I think I take an issue with, and I think my colleagues would as well, because we did not hear those complaints before. Those complaints were not coming in. I've been in office for 6 years. I'm starting my 7th year. I have not gotten one complaint on those issues, but I've gotten thousands on this. So something clearly happened, and we can't blame it all on a pre-existing corroded network. Okay? You can continue, but your time is almost out, and please keep your comments germane on the topic of today's hearing, if you could.
So my comments are related to a pattern of how a network is maintained, which would include information about the network that then Verizon would pick up. Let me suggest to you that the service, given the complaints, the 11 public participation hearings represent real issues, and they were all over the state. So that, in fact, there have been issues larger than what you hear now about the previous service. Just because you didn't hear about them, there were plenty of people and pages, thousands of pages of complaints that did happen during the merger because people have been very concerned. And so part of what I think you are hearing is a certain amount of frustration that has been pent up. People have not known what they could do, and now it's reached, in some places, right, it has reached a crisis point. So I am just trying to offer perspective, if you will, because I've been working on this and hearing complaints up and down the state since 2007.
We appreciate that. Thank you. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. Alex Rooker with CWA Local 9400. And I don't want to reiterate what everybody else has said. And Mike, you and I have had conversations about this. I've been working this building for 15 years plus. And probably longer than any of you have been up here on the dais. And we have complained as workers on what's gone on in the past. And no, nothing, because the company's lobbyists would come in and they would give their side, and then that was the end of the story. Until we filed a complaint with the CPUC. Thank you to Catherine Sandoval, who took all our binders of complaints, and there was a 4-1 vote against Verizon. But that was right before the merger, so they were trying to clean that up. All I'm saying is that our workers, so far, we've had a good relationship with Frontier. Our workers are working really hard. Just give them the benefit of the doubt. Give them an opportunity to fix these things. Let me tell you, I'm the first one to complain when they're not doing what they're supposed to, when these telecoms, and there's a lot more that we need to get out from under the rug, and not on this particular company. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Rex Bone, Humboldt County 1st District Supervisor and 2nd VP of RCRC. My district up on the North Coast, on the Lost Coast, actually has 3 carriers. We have AT&T, I have Verizon, and I have Frontier. And when this change was first being brought forward, I had worked with Frontier on providing Common Core, basically broadband situation, and I'm the most technologically challenged person in the room. I will guarantee you. I just got rid of my flip phone, so I'm, big thing, and I miss it. But what I'm telling you is we have 2 schools and a charter school in one of our remote valleys that couldn't do their Common Core curriculum because they did not have whatever the hell bandwidth is, and so they could not provide this for their students. Frontier stepped up, did underground, worked with all the people. We had problems with Verizon. Now, you didn't get any phone calls, and I've been doing this for about 6 years, too. I've had hundreds of phone calls about Verizon service, and the people are happy about what's coming in with Frontier because at least they're listening. And I think that's all we asked for. And then the other thing is you said something that I thought was I'm going to use at my next meeting. I'm going to explain something to you that even a lawmaker can understand, be it a supervisor or a county. What you had was sounds like a system that was overrated by the seller, but obviously didn't meet up. So they put a big engine in this car, told them it had a great transmission, and you can go race this thing all day long. And it didn't happen because the 2 wouldn't pair up. And I think Frontier, it's going to happen in 10 days. AT&T in Humboldt County, when you're in remote rural Humboldt County, We've had 4 shutdowns exceeding 14 hours in the last 11 months. Shut down our hospitals, shut down our 911 service, shut down where Mendocino County, I know, was staging ambulances on their off-ramps in case somebody needed help. So that's what we were getting from AT&T. We just had a huge meeting with AT&T last week that Senator McGuire and Assemblyman Wood set up. So then they're going to change. They're telling us 180 days. They're going to change. They're giving you 10 days. I think I know phone calls are a pain in the butt, and I know what you're doing, and I see a lot of this with the switchover. They all have someone to blame, and I think we've had some of these issues. But as far as little tiny Humboldt County, we're looking forward to Frontier expanding their operation up there. I know they brought on all the techs from Verizon because we got some pretty good people up there. I know they got sent off to training right away so they'd understand, their core values and everything else. But up there, we've had some issues and we've had great response. But again, we're up there and way up there. So thank you guys for what you do.
Thank you for being here, and we appreciate hearing about some good customer experiences. But this hearing again is to try to get some degree of justice for the tens of thousands of people who I think are having very real bad customer experiences. So yes, next speaker.
My name is Regina Costa. I'm the Telecom Policy Director for TURN, the Utility Reform Network. And we thought there were going to be problems with this transaction. And these exact kinds of problems, because the same thing happened in Connecticut. We hoped that Frontier would have learned a better lesson and that the problems would have been fewer. But it was not a shock, and we said that in our pleadings to the CPUC, and we said that in pleadings to the Federal Communications Commission. The reality was this merger was kind of on a fast track because the way it was set up was there were some funds available from the federal government to support broadband. And both companies had come in with a deal saying we can get this money for California, tens of millions of dollars, so let's hurry up and get this done. Now, there are lessons that can be learned from this and applied to future situations and applied to the situation that we have now to actually bring about improvements. As part of the Commission decision on this transaction, there are reporting requirements about problems that take place with the network. You should make sure that the CPUC follows through on its decision. The terms of that decision are pretty good if the Commission follows through on them. Okay, that's number one. Number two, the information in this record is premature because the problems have not been resolved in 10 days. Okay, we'll see if they're resolved in 10 days. And standing here, I can honestly say I think they're sincere, that they want to get these things resolved, because my colleague, the consumer advocate in Connecticut, we have had many conversations about this. They lost a lot of money in Connecticut because they lost $5 million, the revenue declined $5 million in that state with a transaction of about 1.3 million customers, which is dwarfed by California. Okay, so they have an incentive to get this thing fixed, get it fixed right, and come through. But we don't know if they can do that. And, we don't know if it will happen. We don't know what the final numbers are in terms of the complaints that have come through and what they're about. So the information here is important, but also the CPUC can follow up on this. It can get the data, and then in future deals, it can press the companies for more information. You say you've resolved these problems. What are you doing to resolve these problems? You can bring up the question of, is a flash cut for 2+ million customers a wise thing? Can you do it in stages? Why is the deal structured this way when you've had problems before? Those are the kinds of lessons that can be learned, the kinds of questions that can be raised, and hopefully future problems will be ameliorated.
Thank you. We're going to have one last public comment, and then we're going to go to the CPUC, and we're going to ask these questions. Yes.
I'm Jamie Butler. I'm chair of the Rural Caucus for the California Democratic Party. Hi, Mike. I'm here just to make sure that you guys all pay attention to the rural areas. The complaints that I have heard are not just an inconvenience, they're a matter of life and death. So what I'm asking you for is Verizon, CPUC, all the big telecommunications companies have had a chance to give their input on this. We would like an opportunity to meet with you at some point and give you our rural perspective and our solutions, which we are working on. I'm working with the RCRC on this, and they are working on some solutions on some of the issues that we're having in the rural areas. So please call me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we said one more, but there's another gentleman who wants to speak, so please go ahead, and then we're going to turn to the CPUC.
Thank you, Chairman Gatto. My name is Jose Perez. I'm with Latino Journal, and I participated in several of the public participation hearings that the CPUC had on this transaction, and we certainly see a change. Clearly, this is a good thing that the committee is taking a look at these incredible adjustments that are going on with the service that Frontier has adopted. Our perspective is real simple. These changes, even under Obamacare, took such a long time, a lot of confusion, a lot of frustration. What we're seeing here is a major change with the volume of customers. And so we know that there's a challenge. We have confidence in the team that Frontier has working on this, finding solutions, and we stand ready to offer solutions and be part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Also with us today is Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Tim Sullivan from this California Public Utilities Commission. We're going to let you read a statement and answer some questions. I guess the first question I have is, in the CPUC proceeding where you approved this merger, we had representations made by both parties, both Frontier and Verizon. Frontier represented that it was capable, competent, and ready to handle the transition. So the question is, are you going to reopen this proceeding now to make sure that the statements that were made were accurate?
Thank you, Chairman Gatto. Let me just try and answer these questions. First of all, it's hard for me to speak for the Commission on this particular matter. I used to be a judge, and that would be the type of determination a judge would make. The judge would make it in response to a petition of modification or action on the Commission on its own. It's one of the tools in the toolkit, but whether the Commission does that or not is a speculation on my part.
But you are their executive director. You make recommendations to them. What would be your recommendation at this point?
Well, at this point, what we're focusing on is we're trying to focus on getting the customers reconnected. We have 32 consumer affairs representatives. They're taking calls. I've sent you a fact sheet. Our troubled calls are quadrupling. And so what we're doing is we're working to do that.
Does the CPUC, absent another proceeding, does the CPUC staff have any authority to force a company to make good on its promises?
Yes, there's actually an escalation system, which I wanted to tell you about. First, we take informal complaints. If they're not resolved adequately, we move to a formal complaint process. That way, the customer is able to get their particular case before the judge. In addition, we coordinate what we have a utility enforcement branch, and that can bring, say, an enforcement action on behalf of consumers against the utility. This data will be sort of an input to them for their considerations as to what to do.
And how long would such a proceeding take?
Our proceedings, something like that, would take 12 months. Okay. That would be a complaint proceeding.
So that's not going to help the folks who want to get their service back on now?
No. The focus that we have right now is to get that on. We have a special fast track to the utility company. We work with their executives, and we are basically a last stop resort for Californians who can't get their customer needs met by the utility, and we take that over. What we generally do in a situation like this is we work to get the customers taken care of first, and then afterwards we make a determination what needs to be done to provide justice for the customers, to redress grievances, and to prevent them from happening again. But that's sort of the steps we do. So we try to keep our focus on Californians as opposed to, say, on punishment.
Okay. All right, you may proceed.
Oh, okay. Well, that's basically what I can. We gave you a fact sheet that describes what it is we're doing. I've actually described most of what I had to say, which has to do with our 32 representatives in Northern and Southern California, how they resolve complaints, how they work with customers, and what the escalation part is. To be quite frank, 85% of these complaints have dealt with seem to implicate digital services. As I'm sure you know, the Commission has very little authority over VoIP telecommunication services. It has virtually no authority over Internet and has very limited authority over the video services. It turns out in this particular situation, the services over which we have the most authority, plain old telephone service offered over copper, they have experiences the least outages. What you probably heard from our witness, the detailed questions that she was talking about were all about Internet protocol and routing of sophisticated digital networks. That is the one area where the legislation has both reduced our authority and which the authority is uncertain because of our relationship with the FCC. Nonetheless, what we do is when we get a customer complaint, we work to solve it. And in this situation, even though Frontier could tell us, well, we don't have to talk to you, you have no authority over this service, they have worked with us to restore the services.
So, first of all, I'm not sure that that's entirely accurate, just because I would say about 40% of the complaints we got did implicate POTS, plain old telephone service, in some fashion. The Commission still does have authority over that. But I want to shift gears a little bit and just ask the Commission. I mean, you approved this merger. You are tasked with being California's experts on telecom. You are the regulatory entity with oversight over these mergers in the state of California. And after the FCC acted, it was your action that actually made this merger go forward and blessed it in California. I think, with all due respect, some of the blame is with the CPUC. There could have been lessons learned, as the representative from the Utility Reform Network noted. These problems are not new to this state. They've happened in many other states. I started this hearing by saying we want to learn the lessons, as lawmakers who represent the state of California, but you are regulators whose job it is to understand everything in the world of telecom. And here was a merger approved where you could have placed conditions in terms of the number of customer service representatives available, in terms of the number of technical support representatives available. And to my knowledge, those conditions were not placed that specifically. And then secondly, my position, I've made it very clear this entire year, which is, and I think the Commission President has concurred with me in his testimony before this committee, which is, might there be a better configuration? Might there be a better way that we can do things in the state of California in terms of the way that we oversee telecom? You have the CPUC, which is tasked with pipeline safety and gas pipeline safety and electrical rates and electrical safety. And we've had San Bruno, the San Bruno explosion, which took lives 5 years ago. We have the Porter Ranch situation in Southern California, where tons of methane are being spewed into an already polluted urban environment. And now we have this. And the question that I will ask you is, number one, what have you learned from the merger process? Is there anything you could have done better? And number two, does this just underscore the need to maybe separate some of the regulatory duties in the state of California and to maybe give them to the Department of Consumer Affairs or somebody who is more adept with daily interactions with consumers to help consumers get justice, as opposed to an agency that is tasked with overseeing everything from gas pipelines to hot air balloons? So I'd like to get your opinions on both of those things.
Okay. There's two questions. The question is, should we be doing all the things that we're doing? That's obviously a question for the legislation. I think the things that we're doing have a certain commonality among them. They tend to deal with the infrastructure and the services offered over the infrastructure, and they usually fall into four different areas. Providing Californians with access to those infrastructure needs. We give over $1 billion in subsidies in the communications industry. Another thing we do is we provide safety. We just had a pole and safety en banc addressing pole safety. We deal with the implications of a modern infrastructure. We also are a major environmental agency reducing greenhouse gases. And the last thing we do is traditional cost of service regulation, of which we do almost none for the telecommunications industry. In truth, there is very little authority left to the states to regulate advanced communication services because of the shifting technologies that have moved to digital services. So could someone else could we have learned from this? The answer is yes. It would have made sense to have somebody raise a record and mention what happened in Connecticut and try and produce plans to avoid that in California. That didn't occur. That is largely the responsibility of the adversaries participating in such a proceeding. It would have been good if we did it. We did not. We make mistakes. We have learned from that. So,
I'm going to recognize Ms. Melendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you're ruminating on something over there, so I'll let you just figure out what exactly it is you want to say. I feel like there's a lot of passing the buck going on here today. It's interesting to me that the two of you are sitting next to each other. I'm just realizing now how awkward that must feel.
It is pretty awkward.
Yeah. So, sorry about that. But I guess you didn't get to the heart of what I thought the chairman's question was, which is, what has the CPUC done in this particular case to alleviate, I almost got it, to alleviate the issues that are taking place? Because you've given me all the reasons, or all of the examples of the things you do and all of the things that you can't do, but there must be something that you can do. Otherwise, if you can't help in a situation that affects public utilities, then why should we keep you around?
Just to answer your question, Assemblywoman Melendez, what we do is we deal with customers one by one in a retail operation. We have consumer assistants who answer the phone. As it turns out, many of them have worked for telecommunications utilities for 20 years or more, and when AT&T shifted its service reps overseas, they actually joined us. They provide customer service. They work to resolve the complaints one by one. So that's sort of our first line, what I would call the early responders when there is a problem with utilities. Then that feeds into creation of data, which then goes to our investigators, and the investigators decide should they bring a formal complaint action against the utility. So that's how we do, is sort of an escalation system. That we do within our authority, and that's what we do.
So I've heard witnesses, though, come forward and say that complaints had already been filed about Verizon, about Frontier, that this had already had taken place well in advance of this changeover. So unless I heard incorrectly, I'm wondering why that wasn't part of the whole package when the CPUC was approving this project and anticipating what might go wrong.
That's a question that it's hard for me to answer, why the judge declined to do that, or why the commissioner declined to take those things into consideration. There's sort of a separation between the operational units of the PUC and basically the decisional units that.
But sir, there should not be a separation. I mean, this is your core function. Your core function is assessing how to protect consumers in the state of California. Without that, what is there? What is there? I mean, that is our role in government. That is your role as a regulatory agency with oversight over, you say part of this, well, even part of this merger, your job was to assess what Ms. Melendez said, which is that we've heard today that there were already complaints about the existing infrastructure. There were concerns about how these mergers were handled in other states. There were concerns about the changeover. We are a huge state. It's your job to then oversee this merger, and you just say, okay, go ahead and merge without any anticipation that there could be issues like this?
Well, there was an anticipation of a variety of issues which are addressed in the settlement agreements and efforts to implement broadband. Our authority does continue. We can indeed reopen the case and we can also bring other actions, complaint or sanctioning separately.
Yeah, I mean,
it's sort of an after the effect thing, and I realize it probably would have been better had we used more foresight going in. But
how many complaints have you received so far in connection with this?
Okay, it's on the fact sheet. We generally get 127 complaints for Frontier and Verizon in a month. we got 584 following the merger, and in the first week of May, we have 283. So basically, we're talking about a 5 to 10-fold increase in the number of complaints.
So a 5 to 10-fold increase,
Yes.
which seems to militate against the notion that during the normal course of business, there's enough people complaining about their cable, their telecom service, and that this acquisition related was just a percentage of it. It sounds like it's actually the opposite when it comes to the CPUC, that you've had a 5 to 10-fold increase.
Yes, that's right.
Wow. And for those of you watching at home, people in this room are not twitching. There is a moth the size of a small bird flying around this room, and we're all trying to get it. So let's open this up for any last questions. Mr. O'Donnell, you have a couple last questions, and then
Just a basic question, and maybe it's been answered because I did take a break here and run off to another committee hearing. But with regard to your role, my guess is now you will do an autopsy of the situation, and there will be a report issued, or what formal event happens with regard to what happened with the transfer of service?
Probably what will happen is that the complaint data will be packaged. There will be given to our investigators in what we call the utility enforcement branch, and they will determine what they should do with this, file a complaint or seek some action against the company. Alternatively, the commission on its own motion could open an investigation to find out what happened, or a third course of action would be if the commissioner wishes to do it, she could reopen the merger proceeding to address the new facts that are emerging.
Right. I guess I'm more interested in what happened on the technical side. How was this allowed to go forward? And then this event occurred, and then we were left with the situation we have today. And what I'm hearing is you might do that, or you don't know?
No, what I think the answer is that it wasn't anticipated. It was not anticipated either by the industry experts or by our own people.
But to avoid this in the future?
Well, I think...
So let's learn from this. Is there going to be some type of report? So this is what happened.
Yes,
in the
there will
future,
be
this
that
could
sort of
happen. We
report.
should take note when there's some other type of merger that these kind of complications could arise, so we can learn from this.
Yes, that will be that report will come.
That'll be a report on that topic.
Yes,
a public report or a
it'll be a public report.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, in general, we are going to wrap up this hearing. It is we've already gone a little bit over the time that we thought it would go. And my only conclusion or concluding remarks would be that I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed with our regulatory agency. I think it's one thing to talk about learning about this issue here in the state of California for other utility mergers going forward, but I'm also disappointed with the idea that we live in a world where there have been several of these that have already occurred, both in the state and, even more importantly, there were several of this precise merger with these precise companies that occurred in other states. And it sounds to me that our regulatory agency did not learn from those mistakes made in other states, and that to me I think is very unfortunate. And I think the regulatory system has let down the customer here in California. When it comes to the company, I'm also disappointed. I'm heartened by your reaction today, and I think you know how serious the problem is. But then again, I think that the customers out there were mistreated. I think that they feel tremendously disrespected by the way that they were treated, particularly by the call center. We know in this world it's not often what you say, but how you say it. And I think that the customers feel that the way that they were treated by the call center and the way that the problems were handled once they were identified as problems was bad. And I think that you've got a long way to go to regain that the consumer's trust in California. And I think I speak for all of them that we hope you do regain that, because this is a critical service you're providing for everybody in the world that we live in. Internet is just as critical as telephone service, and we want to have people out there who have seamless service when it comes to these necessities. Other than that, I thank you for being here today. I really appreciate both of your time. I appreciate the time of all the people who came up to testify from as far away as Santa Monica and Eureka. Most importantly, I want to announce just the the contacts that people can contact if problems persist. So, of course, they can contact my office. They can call me at 818-558-3043. They can go to my website, which is asm.ca.gov/Gatto, and they can contact me. We actually do read every single email you send. They can contact Mr. O'Donnell. He's already heard from hundreds, if not thousands of you already. Some of them have knocked on his door, and I'm not sure if I can say that's welcome, but we certainly try to welcome solving these issues. And I know he's been very responsive, as has Ms. Melendez and all the other members, Mr. Obernolte, who are fielding these complaints. I believe they can also contact you. And the email address, if I remember correctly, is...
Let Melinda know at ftr.com.
So that was let Melinda know at ftr.com. And in terms of contacting the CPUC, they can also do that. And the contact number for the CPUC or the contact email address is?
Well, there's the contact phone number is 1-800-649-7570. And if they want to contact me, the number is asktheexec@cpuc.ca.gov.
Thank you very much. And we're going to let our vice chair make a last closing statement. He did not get a chance to make an opening statement. And so, everybody, this is Mr. Patterson, who represents Fresno. Mr. Patterson, the floor is yours.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Very, very quickly. One of the important aspects of an inquiry like this is sort of the takeaway. And I've heard a couple of very specific things, and I wanted to make sure I heard them clearly. One, that within a very short period of time, I believe it was 10 days, that it is your intention to have these technological switching and transition issues over. Is that correct? And does that mean that the complaint levels will return to some kind of normal place, or will you still be working through the aftermath of the complaints?
I think the complaint levels or the calls will move more to billing questions. The first bills from Frontier have already hit the market, and many of the calls / complaints that we're getting today are around billing. So I hope that answers your question.
And the other question was you were, and again, these have been very clear representations and commitments. And I just want to make sure that when the 10th day comes,
yep.
that
what I said is that we will have the backlog completely moved through, given that we always have a backlog, but certainly the ones that we're talking about from April in 10 days. That was my commitment.
And you made a commitment with respect to other aspects of the transition at the middle part or end of June. Could you clarify precisely what that commitment was?
Yes, I was talking about the video on demand and the fact that we are still ingesting certain titles on especially TV and subscription VOD. So my understanding, let me check that, is that the middle of June is when we will be complete. So that's where I was getting the middle of June number.
Great, thank you. And one quick, and I keep saying quick. If you could summarize, given the transition and what appears to have been a very surprising and unexpected kind of happening, what have you learned about the merger and the problems that were that arose, and how is that going to inform, perhaps change or modify the manner in which you make similar decisions going forward?
Well, I think it does point specifically to the lack of the right contingency plan. You're right, we did not anticipate this. We also know from the last many weeks that what we do every day is absolutely what we should continue doing, which is identify and implement local channels. That's how we lead, it's how we operate, it's how we are in the community. and we will continue to do that. And now we have to do that, need to do that in a much bigger way, because to your point, we need to regain confidence. And you'll see us in our markets doing just that. What you've already seen in many of your areas, you'll see even more now that we have the larger portion of California.
Okay. Thank you. And to the PUC, very quickly, I just want to echo the chairman's. Sir, if you cannot handle this well, what can you handle well? And I'll leave it at that. This is a failure of the fundamental role and responsibility, I think, of the PUC. And please understand that as much as Frontier has a obligation to regain their customers' respect and appreciation, you have a big job repairing it with members of this committee as well.
We understand that, Subcommittee Patterson. Actually, just yesterday, we announced a reorganization to highlight consumer protection and enforcement at the Commission. We've appointed a new team, and this will be one of the first assignments given to them.
All right. All right, thank you. So we're going to adjourn this hearing. Again, thank you for everybody who participated. And just because we're adjourning this hearing does not mean that we're stopping our inquiry into this. We will continue to try to solve these problems, and I know that you will work on them as well. And I want to thank everybody who participated today. This meeting is adjourned.